Hi, my name is Peter, and for my topic, I'll be looking at designing with communities, and in particular, urban sprawl within our cities. Regional cities in Australia, such as Townsville, may experience similar conditions as cities around the world that expand with the phenomena of urban sprawl. Wuhan, an example of a Chinese city, experienced immense economic increase, which drove urban sprawl at a large scale. Literature provided on urban sprawl is both broad and abundant. According to MAA401 and Kyotes, urban sprawl has been researched by many disciplines, and as a result, the definition of urban sprawl tends to become too complex. Academics from the disciplines of economics and geography provide a large amount of quantitative research, and urban planning experts are able to present qualitative arguments based on quantitative research. Dovey and the World Watch Institute have presented many articles with such qualitative arguments. These provide insight into urban patterns as assemblages that nurture place to evolve on its own. Community has the ability to be nurtured and transformed into a positive, self-sustaining cities, according to Gardner. These authors, however, do not speak directly to urban sprawl, yet it is important to understand how urban patterns are built, as the phenomena of urban sprawl is a construct of assemblages that need to be more heavily considered. Bourdon speaks of homogeneity in European cities, and this could be a significant concept to understand how populations choose to live in housing estates that have apparent similarities. These concepts of qualitative argument may be instrumental when interpreting the quantitative research into urban sprawls and identifying mechanisms to improve how they evolve. Feng et al. Provide excellent modelling into the spatio-temporal occurrences of sprawls in China. Cross-referencing some of their discussion about large cities with Navarre-Morillon and Kyotes, research provides a picture that shows how sprawls might be more contained in larger cities than smaller ones. When addressing the issues involved with urban sprawl, it is important to use both qualitative and quantitative data to identify the sprawls. My research question: how do urban patterns occur in high-income urban sprawls, and can identifying them help to improve the way that we inhabit cities? First of all, identifying sprawl. As has been already established, urban sprawl has been studied from many points of view, so it can be defined in many different ways. I wish to determine urban sprawl with a definition based in urban geography for the purpose of this paper. Feng et al. Describe urban sprawl as a condition where land growth exceeds population growth, and Calthorpe categorizes urban sprawl into three categories: low-income sprawl, high-income sprawl, and high-density sprawl. For the purpose of this paper, I will focus on high-income sprawl. Post-war development saw people wanting to move away from the cities and into suburbs. US cities experienced high-income sprawl first, followed by many cities across the developed world. Urban sprawl is typically seen as a negative effect on our cities, but is it a necessity when considering population growth and migration to larger city centres? Let's look at Wuhan, China. When reading about urban sprawl, almost every text links urban sprawl with economic drivers in some way. Feng et al. Observed 285 prefectures in China from the years 2003 to 2017, measuring sprawl over time. Their map identifies the study area, breaking it up into western, central, and eastern regions. The cities categorized by small, medium cities, large cities, and megacities. These graphs show their results on urban population sprawl and display a correlation between sprawl and city size. The correlation demonstrated here is that the larger the city, the lower the tendency to sprawl. These graphs here demonstrate their results based on urban land sprawl, which appears to follow the same trend as population sprawl. Take note of the sprawl units on the left-hand axis. Land sprawl is at a much larger rate, than population sprawl. This gives evidence to the argument that urban sprawl can be defined by land growth exceeding population growth. So some of the driving forces for urban sprawl start to become apparent when investigating the differences in cities. Navmiel, Morillon and Kyotes explain in their study that larger cities have better infrastructure and better building practices. Detached housing in smaller towns contribute to land sprawl. Migration to cities, as pointed out by Prue, also contribute to sprawls as people move closer to economic opportunity. When researching urban sprawl, which is driven by economic growth, Wuhan is a case study that has been widely looked at. Looking at this aerial shot of Wuhan, I retrieved from Google Earth using historical imagery, you can see a good mix of water bodies and plains in geographic terms. According to Hu et al., the Wuhan landscape contains 39.3% plains, 26.2% water, and 18.2% mountains. It sits at the confluence of the Yangtze and the Han rivers, which are heavily used for transportation. At closer inspection, during 1987, Wuhan was surrounded by what looks to be agricultural land, and if we look at the same area today, we can see that the agricultural land has started to be taken up by urban conversion. Neo-urbanization has occurred on a large scale in Wuhan. Significant economic increase can be measured by population growth and gross domestic product. Leading into the next identifying aspect of urban sprawl, Zheng et al. Agree that urban sprawl in Wuhan between 1990 and 2013 was caused by population growth, economic development, and they also bring up the point of transport infrastructure. So that leads me on to my next identifying trait of urban sprawl. Patterns in urban sprawl, infrastructure. These maps demonstrate Wuhan's proximity to major transportation infrastructure and the Yangtze River. The Yangtze River, as a naturally occurring feature, is a mode of transportation that contributes significantly to the economy across many regions in China. The Beijing-Gangshu Railway, also as a major contributor to economic growth in the region, places Wuhan at the intersection between two major economic corridors for China's high-speed rail and water transport. As discussed, the economic driving factor contributes to urban sprawl, along with transport infrastructure. Transport infrastructure form the physical patterns we can observe to identify where urban sprawls might occur, but they are fueled by economic increases. As a more local example, in Australia, Townsville recently witnessed sprawls from their beginnings. Here is a historical aerial shot of Townsville I acquired from the website Q Imagery, which shows the urban boundary of Townsville in 1960. And here, with the same historical image overlaid into Townsville today, you can see how growth has occurred over a 60-year period. Just to provide some context of the growth in Townsville, I'll demonstrate some of the main urban features that led to the growth and subsequent sprawls. This slide shows where the main CBD of Townsville is situated. This is also where the historical city centre has always been since Townsville's conception. Here are two of Townsville's main road connections that join the main business centre with residential areas. These roads are predominantly 80 kilometres per hour zones. And then here are the other main roads with significantly less traffic, but they are still the main connections for people to their workplaces. Here is the main highway, Ring Road, added in. Now, it is important to point out that there is very little public transport in Townsville and very sparse bike tracks. Some of the rivers cannot be crossed by bike paths, and instead cyclists must cross the busy bridges that puts them in dangerously close to cars and trucks. Some of the outlying growth of Townsville has directly seeded from the main connection roads. Some of these satellite suburbs have created business centres of their own, and sprawls continue to occur during the present time where they will continue to expand. These dark circles indicate proximity and density of employment, so it can be observed that the projected location of residential sprawls are building up further away from employment centres. This developing pattern is contributing to Townsville becoming more reliant on cars as a mode of transportation to employment centres. This pattern also affects lifestyles, as the time dedicated to work needs to be increased due to travel, and this time away from home and family life becomes less desirable in cities. It's this urban pattern that I would like to make observations on. Looking closer at the more northern suburbs of Townsville, these sprawling areas here occur on major road networks, and the main road to the Townsville CBD here intersects with the Highway Ring Road. This Highway Ring Road connects these suburbs further down the line to the major hospital, subsequent medical precincts, James Cook University and the Army Barracks, which are all major employers in Townsville. New connecting roads are still being built within these sprawling areas, and there are massive residential zones planned in these locations. So while the patterns relating to transport and urban sprawl are obvious, another aspect to look out for is electricity infrastructure. Navamur, Minon and Curtis found that electricity access can influence urban sprawl. Where growth in detached housing occurs, the electrical infrastructure needs to meet the intended demand. Electricity demand found in Townsville demonstrates a randomness in electrical appliance use and heavy use of environmental controls, particularly air conditioning. Both place significant demand on electricity infrastructure. Upon investigation, the pattern of infrastructure that can be identified in Townsville sprawl is essentially tied to road networks. In this case, the attached services give the connecting infrastructure more potency, contributing to inevitability of sprawl. These service corridors have branched out from the Townsville city, and like the branch of a tree, growth occurs vigorously at the tips and then sporadically back along the branches. The more intense the service, the more potential for growth. As access to services increases the desirability of inhabitation. By comparing Townsville sprawl to Wuhan, do we see a similar pattern of growth occurring? Looking back at the zoomed-in images of Wuhan, we were able to witness similar patterns of growth contributing to sprawl, with another aspect added in, neo-urbanism, which is the repurposing of rural, impoverished areas to become developed cities. But this type of sprawl is also fed by the supply of services such as electricity and transportation, just like in Townsville. It is important at this point to understand that the components that make up these patterns are parts of an assemblage. They exist within the urban patterns both individually and as the collective assemblage that makes up the entire urban setting. At the very same time, any component within an urban pattern exists individually, and it is also part of the larger assemblage. As this assemblage is constructed with the urban context, it becomes a place that continually evolves itself. With respect given to the patterns of growth within sprawling areas and economic driving factors, it may be important to nurture growth areas and encourage positive outcomes for urban centres to become more self-sufficient and more sustainable. Urban sprawl can contribute to many negative issues, including but not limited to the issues analysed within this research: land spread, transportation and energy use. One of the most important and obvious effects of urban sprawl is the land spread issue. This has proven to encroach on both agricultural land and natural environments. When the agricultural land is removed, the demand for food production remains and even increases. This contributes to deforestation, as agricultural land requires the best growing conditions which are present in forests and rainforests. When comparing Townsville with Wuhan, the Wuhan official government placed the population at 9,790,000 registered residents, and Townsville City Council website places Townsville at 193,600 persons. The local government area of Townsville is 3,736 square kilometres, and Wuhan occupies 8,494 square kilometres. So based on the calculation of people per square kilometre, this places the density of Wuhan at 20 times that of Townsville. Looking at these two slides of a typical residential zone in both the cities at a similar scale, it's apparent that Townsville housing stock is predominantly detached housing. While Wuhan contains more higher density apartments, what appears to be detached housing in the bottom left corner is very tightly packed. The Townsville aerial shot shows larger yards for the majority of houses, so this would suggest that Townsville is at a higher risk of experiencing urban land sprawl. But more quantitative investigation needs to be carried out based on this assumption. Tied to land spread is transportation. As an issue for urban sprawls, especially when public transport is less important in the urban planning, physically, when the type of land sprawl observed in Townsville increases, the per unit distance to travel increases exponentially. Each house with a larger block size increases the area much more rapidly than the house with a smaller block or apartments per capita. More research here will uncover the effects of this on lifestyle. When looking at the opposite scale of this, Chinese megacities have encountered the implementation of superblocks, which were invented by Swiss architect Charles-Edouard Jeanneret, better known as Le Corbusier. Calthorpe discusses the scale of these superblocks reduces community connection amongst neighbouring residents. Due to the larger density in the living area, the less recognisable people tend to be, increasing anonymity. Whether occupants live in high-density apartments or dispersed detached housing, it appears that the population tends to reside in housing that is similar to that which surrounds them. Both categories of arranging housing within an urban setting tend to favour cars as the main mode of transport, and the person is considered to be an afterthought. This aspect not only leads to environmental impacts, but promotes loneliness within cities that ironically contain our communities. The commute alongst densely packed footpaths disallows the opportunity for people to socialise, just as a commute in the car removes the social contact almost completely on a busy road. This would increase the probability for negative incidents of social contact to prevail rather than nurturing positive connections. Again, I would like to research this assumption further to find evidence of it occurring within the cities. Electricity infrastructure increases the potential for urban growth. Reliable services make a city more desirable for both residential living and industrial commercial productivity. Townsville, although it has taken up residential solar power generation, its peak energy demand is significant throughout the year. There does appear to be improvements underway as appliances become more energy efficient and along with new construction and materials. So moving further with this study, there would be value in linking all these issues together to discover ways to improve urban sprawls. Even though urban sprawl has negative impacts and we seem to be unable to control it so far, is it here to stay? Should we accept it as an organic progression when considering population growth? Hugh et al. Describes urbanization as a vital interface for humans and the environment. So far in this research study, we have identified key ingredients for the type of growth that leads to urban sprawl. Economic increases fueled by population growth, positive GDP, along with transportation infrastructure. We have identified patterns in transport infrastructure that, when powered by economic driving forces, might be able to present us with early signs of urban sprawl. I believe that identifying urban sprawl early can give local governments a chance to react with policy changes that influence urban planning decisions and make improvements on urban settings to promote and nurture a growing community. Along with identifying patterns within transport infrastructure, we can measure the potential for growth in the potency of services being provided. This aspect could be investigated further, as the potency of services does not necessarily indicate unmitigated growth, because the study presented by Narvamal, Morlon and Curtes indicates the quality of electricity infrastructure contributes to growth in larger city locations. Narvamal, Morlon and Curtes also points to the fact that these locations implement better building practices, and Feng et al. discovered that sprawl occurs on lesser scale within the same locations. Thank you.